This is the 007 Debriefings. I am Intelligence Officer Wiz.
And I'm Weapon Specialist Zero.
Zero, how you doing this week?
A bit exhausted.
Yeah, I've heard you had a rough time out there. Everything's okay now?
Yeah, just freak power outage messed up my sleep last night, so I'm just running on fumes.
Oh yeah, those are terrible, man. All right, so we are here to comb the files of MI6 to discuss the cinematic adventures of James Bond. Now going into the 8th mission, which is Live and Let Die. Zero, this is the first one with Roger Moore. I don't know if you've seen any of the other Roger Moore films. What are your thoughts on him as Bond before we review all of his movies, if you've seen them before?
Oh yeah, I've seen, I believe, all the Roger Moore ones, and he's kind of a fun portrayal of Bond, kind of suave, a little bit of a chauvinist, but not as overt as Connery was.
Yeah, that is true. I decided to do this years ago and try to go through all the Bonds, and I got up to Men with a Golden Gun, and I just stopped. And it wasn't because I was not having fun. I thought they were good movies. I just got distracted. Man with the Golden Gun was the last one I did. I didn't remember so much of this movie very much, but I think you hit the nail right in the head. He's fun. He's just a fun portrayal of the character. So why don't we just get right into the review now that we're really getting down into it. Let's get to our mission objectives. We go through all sorts of objectives when we're talking about these movies. And we're going to start with 007, which is, of course, Roger Moore, who is playing James Bond. You said it already, Zero. This is a fun portrayal of Bond. You also hit another part that I want to talk about, too. Whereas Connery is more, I guess, chauvinistic and much more about gruffness and machismo, Moore's Bond is more debonair and sophisticated. More gentlemanly, I would say. More statesman-like. Someone that has a more upper crust feel, whereas Connery is more rough and tumble to a certain extent, but just looks good in a suit.
It was just kind of a fun change of things, especially like in the opening scene, just Moore's Bond is just they're cuddling with a woman in bed, and I'm just like, oh, that's kind of sweet. And then of course when M stops by, he's like, oh shit, and then he's basically kind of like telling her, hey, you need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And then of course after that whole exchange, he finds her hiding in the coat closet, and then he ends up playing around with the new Q developed gadget and just unzips the woman's dress, and he's like, I don't think I'm quite done yet. And she's like, oh, you're so gentle with your manly touch. I'm just like, he's smooth, playing around with his new gadget already.
Well, you and I are both the same. When we get new tech, we want to use it, right? I do like Morris Bond. I think you, again, said it well. He's fun. He's just not interesting in the way that I would say Connery is, but he's just a more enjoyable Bond. You take him less seriously. I'd say the only weakness that I would have is that he doesn't seem to be that threatening or dangerous, even when he tries to be. There's one scene in the film where he has a gun to a woman's head, and at no point would you actually believe that he would pull the trigger. He just doesn't seem that type of character, even though that's who Bond is. He does action very well. I think it's a solid performance for Moore in this movie, and I just want to see where he goes moving forward.
Well, he's kind of soft gentleman. The action scenes do work out. Definitely, he hasn't sort of come into the rough and tumble side of Bond yet. I'm hoping he sort of gets into that part of Bond a little bit more with some of the movies we'll be seeing in the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. He's definitely lacking on like the dangerous threat side of Bond when he gets real sort of like rough and tumble in absolute desperation to just get out of a jam and those sorts of scenarios.
Okay, so let's get into the villain, which is Dr. Kanaga, who is also known as Mr. Big, played by Yaphet Kotto. I like Yaphet Kotto. I am more familiar with him in Homicide: Life in the Streets, but when I first saw this film and he was the villain, I was like, oh my god, I never knew he was in this movie. And seeing him young and being this character really was interesting to see because he has this very unique presence. He's not only able to utilize that superimposing physique that he has, but he also is very expressive. That said, I don't think he's utilized that well in this movie. I do like him as an actor. I think when he is in the planning stages, when he is doing the orders, I think he's very believable as that character. When it comes to being physical, he looks goofy as hell. Like, he does not work. And I think the only time he gets physical is in the last scene, and that fight sequence is pretty bad.
Yeah, the plotting and debate parts where he's featured, he's very good. Just he kind of shows that he's sort of in control of the plan, and just Bond trying to be clever. He sort of just exudes sort of a much stronger presence to Bond, saying, "I see through your shenanigans. You're trying to be clever. You can't outwit me." And then when it just gets down to the fight scene towards the end, it just doesn't look great. Him being blown up by the compressed air cartridge looks so corny.
I know.
Because it was just like, he got no jibs just flying everywhere? Wow, he just looks like he was just a inflated plastic balloon that just blew up.
And you would think Solitaire would be like, "Oh my god, what happened?" I would be like mortified, like, "Oh my god, the viscera and all the body parts. Holy shit."
Yeah.
And she's like, "What happened, Bond?" He blew up. Like, okay. Well, I forgot what the line was, but it was like, it was just so...
I think the line was like,
Oh,
he was full of hot air or something.
He's always had an inflated ego.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
okay.
it.
Here's my one criticism, and it really has nothing to do with Kodo and his performance, because I like Kodo in this movie. I kind of wish they played up the Dr. Kananga and Mr. Big thing a lot more, because it made it very obvious in the beginning that they're the same person.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, because if they would have said, like, "Oh, why does this respectable politician want to do with this drug kingpin?" It would have been a lot more interesting if they just kept it separate for a while to let the mystery go through. But because they didn't, that was completely deflated. I think if they would have went that route and made it more of a mystery, it would have made Kananga a little more interesting. But I think he's a solid villain. He's not one of the best villains, but I think Kodo is underutilized.
When the mask off moment happens, when Mr. Big starts removing the prosthetics, and it's just like, surprise, I'm Dr. Kananga. It's just like, damn it, guys. If you did this a little closer towards the end of the movie, that would have been one hell of a surprise for like the viewer going, holy shit, this respectable politician is the drug lord. Holy shit. But it was just kind of like, we're in the middle of the movie. The stakes aren't that high. So, yeah, we're just going to go mask off already. I was just like, you guys could have saved this for later, and it would have had such a bigger and more dramatic impact.
But it wasn't even a surprise either when it happened, because it was just like, okay.
Yeah, he just starts peeling parts of his facial prosthetic off.
Let's move on to the Bond girl, which is Solitaire, played by Jane Seymour. Zero, we grew up in the 90s as teenagers, so if we were familiar with Jane Seymour at all, it was because of commercials of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. Correct? I mean,
yeah,
all right,
definitely.
So that's where we were more familiar with this actress. So when she was in this movie, I was kind of surprised. I was like, really? She's in this movie? And I gotta tell you, and this is the most I'll talk about her looks, I was stunned how gorgeous she is in this movie. Holy hell.
She was real pretty in this one. I was just like, wow, holy shit. That was Dr. Quinn in the younger days? Holy shit.
I know. I was like, damn. And then, of course, for fun, I was like, I wonder what she looks like now. And, of course, at 73, she's still stunning. Let's get to her performance. I liked her as Solitaire. I liked the character that she was playing. I kind of wish there was more depth to her. There is an interesting thing with this character where she uses tarot cards while being in a business that deals with voodoo. And they're two completely separate religions. I think voodoo is a religion, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, there would have been a very interesting thing to dive into with both of those contrasting religions, but they kind of go nowhere with that. Like, I would really want to know.
It isn't necessarily a religion, but it's just a tool of divination. Tarot has been around for quite a long time. I mean, there's some historical account that it originated back in the 1400s. Tarot is associated with the occult, which that's what voodoo is real heavily invested into. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a religion per se, but tarot cards are just simply a tool of divination.
Okay, so there is an attachment to them that I wasn't aware of, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, then that makes more sense to me. I like Solitaire, but if we're being honest, she's a damsel in distress in this movie. But it makes sense, and it's fine because they don't try to play her up as much more than that. She is essentially a tool for Kananga, and Bond has to find a way to utilize her in his mission. It makes sense that she is this very naive person.
I do think it's a bit ironic that Bond's magic penis actually curses her.
Oh God, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because she goes off on the whole bit of powers are linked to my purity, and the day I lose my purity is the day I will lose the ability to divine the future. And then, of course, just Bond completely rigging the deck with like the lover's cards to trick her and seduce her. I'm just like, oh no, Bond, you've cursed her.
That was pretty funny. I was like, that was pretty clever. And then when you realize what it did, I'm like, uh-oh. Overall, I like Solitaire in this movie. I really like Jane Seymour in this too. Again, I don't think there's a lot of her. All right, Zero, so let's get into spy action. I think right now, if Live and Let Die is going to be known for one thing for me, it's the stunts. There are loads of stunts in this movie. And you know what? They're pretty damn. Like, they seem to be all done on location. There's not a lot of projection screens. I think they're largely gone. There might be a couple that I missed. But I think overall, like, the stunts when it came to, like, foot chase scenes, car chase scenes, boats, gunplay, maybe not so much the hand-to-hand, I think they're really well done.
This is a movie that's finally got a huge leap forward in just the spy action stuff, especially with regards to your mention of, like, the green screen stuff. The only time that I think the green screen stuff was really noticeable is the airport runway scene where Bond ends up hijacking a flight student's plane and runs it around the airport and everything. There are a few scenes where you see him in the cockpit with the very, very confused flight student, and it's very obvious it's a green screen, but yeah, just other than that, this movie is just a huge step forward in just the action and stunt work, because it's mostly just practical effects this time. Very little green screen or projection sort of shenanigans going on, and if there are, it's done very well that you'd have to actively look for it to pretty much notice it.
There are a couple of things I have a problem with the action. One, I think it's a little too slapstick and comedic at times. Like, you just mentioned the runway scene where Bond was traveling around the runway in a student plane, and that was fun at first, but then it kind of was like, okay, I get the joke now. The other one, and I think is egregious and actually hurts the final sequence of the film, is the speedboat sequence in the third act. They have the very long speedboat sequence, which is supposed to be, I think, the climactic action sequence of the entire movie, but it's way too long. And I think the reason why is because they add this character in that is incredibly annoying and incredibly dumb and just offers nothing to the movie other than an annoying, like, I'm gonna get you, dang-nabbit, and that's Sheriff J.W. Pepper, played by Clifton James. He is in this scene way too much. And I would have understood if it was just like an annoying character you would have seen for like a few seconds. He's doing something he shouldn't be doing. His car gets destroyed. End of sequence happens. And then you have to arrest Bond. And then he gets told, no, you can't do that. Here's why. He gets annoyed. And then, okay, fine. But they highlight him way too fucking much. And to the point where it actually hurts the flow of the action.
The boat chase sequence definitely went a bit long, especially just when Sheriff J.W. Pepper gets introduced. And it's just like, I get it. This film was made during the blaxploitation era. You gotta have the country boy sheriff who thinks he's got things on the up and everything, and then just Bond with his usual destructive chase sequences, as is custom in most Bond movies. And every time he gets foiled, it just camera pans to him, he's like, dang, 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 and it's just like, I get it, he's the bumbling racist country sheriff, but this doesn't really add much to it.
Yeah.
And then of course you have some of the silly sequences, like the boat cutting across the road, the boats ripping through a wedding. I get it. I mean, those are kind of highlighting the destruction in some of the Bond chase sequences, but at the same time, I do agree with you. They do come off a bit slapstick, and then the slapstick element gets further accentuated when you cut to like a scene with Sheriff J.W. Pepper just like throwing a hissy fit because just things aren't going exactly to plan for him.
And you mentioned the blaxploitation stuff that the movie was trying to pull from. Everything else about the film is good. I like the villains. I like the settings that they're in. And I like what happens throughout the entire film that calls back to that era. But it's that specific character that grinds that last sequence to a halt. Honestly, I think half the sequence is that character. And it does absolutely nothing to this movie at all. And I think this is not the last time we see him, correct? He's in the next one as well?
I think so.
Yeah, so more to look forward to on that one. Good Lord. So, yeah. I mean, if it weren't for that, I would say this is probably one of the better films when it comes to action. But that final sequence is unfortunate because it really just feels like they said, let's take a break from Bond and the villains and let's get this random character here all of a sudden. I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? And we're at to the last one, which is the theme song and opening credits, which is Live and Let Die, written by Linda and Paul McCartney, performed by Paul McCartney and Wings. I mean, if we listen to the last episode, you know I think this song is catchy as hell. So you got me on that one. It's exciting with decent lyrics. It gets you pumped for it's going to happen throughout the entire film. And it also calls back to itself throughout the entire film. And it works.
God, just what a fantastic opening song and what a fantastic closing song. It's just like, oh, I know, just it's hard not to like something from Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney, but oh God, just this one, definitely one of the most fantastic Bond themes in the history of Bond.
I agree. This is a really good theme.
It's just so interesting to see like a major pop star composer being asked to just create the theme for a Bond movie. It was I think this probably would have been a shocker to people back when it released. It would probably have been like, oh my God, you've got Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney writing the theme song. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they continue to do this from now on, right? Because I know Sam Smith did one. I know that Adele did another one. Like Tina Turner, I think, was Goldeneye, correct? I mean, this has been...
Tina Turner was Goldeneye, yeah.
And this has been a staple ever since. So I guess this is where it started. The opening credits are good, too, but they basically use the same tropes from previous Bond films, which is like attractive naked women covered in the shadow while dancing seductively, while images of the film's mood populate the screen. But it's kind of like slightly more edgy. It's more death-oriented. I thought that was pretty good as well. But I think the song is really good and the opening credits are good. Okay, so in our conclusion, Zero, mission accomplished or mission failure?
Mission accomplished. This one, I think, really the thing that sets it apart from some of the past Bond movies is just the action has mostly improved for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially just from the fact that you're seeing more practical stunts and much less projection screen sort of techniques to give the illusion of action going on.
I also give it mission accomplished. I think this is a good Bond movie. It's a fun Bond movie as well. It's starting to delve more into the fantastic elements, the fantasy elements, such as with Solitaire and a lot of the Baron Samedi stuff, but it's still a fun movie, and I think that's the key thing, that the film makes it much more fun than I would say that the other Bond films with Connery. Although the Connery films for Bond are fun, but they're grounded more in reality. I think the better ones are. Whereas this one is just having a good time. I do like the direction that went in here as well. But I also do understand why some people do not like Roger Moore as Bond, because it is kind of a big departure from what Connery was as Bond.
And I mean, I can definitely see where some people would take issue with that, because you go from Connery, who's kind of the rough and tumble Bond, looks great in a suit, the action scenes with him look pretty good now, and then you kind of go to the debonair gentleman Bond, and he just doesn't quite have the element of danger about him. And I can definitely see why some people might have seen this movie and been like, he's not Connery, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah, like when you get used to one who symbolized that character for, I think it was like 7 movies, or is it 6 movies? For like 6 movies, you get used to that and you're comfortable with that. So when they change it up this much, I can see why some would be annoyed by that. But I just like the feel of the movie. I think it's fun. Is it as faithful as the other Bond movies from Connery when it comes to the books?
There's a bit more to be desired from sort of the brutal savagery that Bond has in the books, because Moore's depiction is definitely more gentlemanly, which it's not a bad thing, but it definitely lacks the brutality that Bond has when just he gets into a real jam and he's just like, I don't care what I gotta do, I gotta make sure I live and get this mission done, and I'm willing to do damn near anything, including kill several people just to get the objective done. But maybe that'll change when we get into the next couple of movies that Moore's in, and maybe he will evolve further as we go along.
He's definitely more smooth, I would say, than Connery was, but then I think the danger and the really rough elements of Connery what made his Bond very engaging and interesting. Overall, mission accomplished for both of us here, correct?
Yeah.
Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. All right, Zero, so that is the end of this file of the 007 Debriefings. So we are going into the next one, which is the next one from Roger Moore, and that one is...
The Man with the Golden Gun from 1974.
Yeah, boy. And this one, I think, has one of my favorite villains in the Bond film, and that's the one played by Christopher Lee, which is Scaramanga, I think, is that correct?
Yeah, Scaramanga. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't wait for this. All right, guys, well, that'll be it for the 007 Debriefings. Tune in next time where we go over the file for The Man with the Golden Gun. I'm Intelligence Officer Wiz.
And I'm Weapon Specialist Zero.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.